Hey everybody, it's David with Note Chaser. And today's topic is the concept of living just a day at a time. This is something that's prevalent in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not just particular to them though. A lot of people kind of suggest this route of living that for people that deal with, struggling with their past, or people that have anxiety and worrying about the future, or, people that future trip, or just people that are unsure of where their life is at the moment and just kind of have a sort of insecurity and uncertainty about that. And that's certainly, where I find myself at. I've just been doing a lot of self-reflecting, maybe almost too much recently, just trying to figure out my life, where I'm going at this point. I feel like I've kind of have gone through this sort of midlife crisis type of thing, where I've dealt a lot with, feeling that I finally have like got this thing nailed down, and not completely nailed down. You never completely have like an addiction and alcoholism nailed down, but that I finally have like made a psychic change in my mind. And then some days I go back and it's just this kind of uncertainty of how I feel from day to day. And it's hard to kind of just keep a sort of momentum going when the mind constantly changes about what it even thinks about life. This could be in terms of more basic things. This could be in like existential terms. And the way I figured it is that what can I have that could be consistent every single day? Like what mindset can I sort of adopt that I can keep with every day? Because it feels like, maybe this is particular to addicts and alcoholics, that it's so easy, it can be easy at times to shake from what your main direction or what your like supreme goals and values are, or maybe not changing what your values are, but just not being able to live up to them in a certain day, and just kind of falling back to like old behaviors and patterns. And it's kind of one of those things where, especially with addiction and alcoholism, in terms of like relapse and stuff, it's so particularly hard because it's not like with a lot of things in life. You can kind of take two steps forward and then one step back, but then take two steps forward and one step back. But especially like struggling in early recovery, like taking a step back, as in a relapse or a lapse or something, feels like it just sends you much further back, that you're on just such a slippery slope, that you're walking this sort of tightrope act. And it just feels like you have one off day, or you just have one day where you're just too impulsive, and it sends you like all the way back in this sort of vicious cycle. And it's just hard to stay out of that cycle. And I've been really trying to just focus on this thing of being just one day, like just truly to asking myself and putting myself up to the task of, can I just be sober for just today, like no matter what? Can I just do it just for today? And one thing is that it can fall into this trap of sort of white knuckling it, where you think that like, all right, I'll just hold on just for today. But I've learned this through my own experiences, that doing that day after day will kind of slowly erode you. It will just start to break you down, where if you don't really actually remedy those difficult days, or that wave of depression, or the constant cravings, or the thinking about going back out and drinking or using, if you don't like do anything about it, they'll go away, but they'll keep coming back. And it's just like no real progress is being made. And it's kind of a strange thing, where it's this dichotomy between surviving the day and that being a victory, or just barely surviving the day and just living this sort of miserable life where you're just living just to not do something. That's truly a way, a life that you don't want to have, where your life is just all about just holding off and just barely getting by. It's funny, like drinking and using, a life of being an active alcoholism or addiction, is kind of like a life of just bare survival. Like you have to do everything you can just to drink and use and just kind of function in your life, and you're just barely surviving. And I don't want the other version of that to be just barely surviving, as in I'm just barely hanging on, I'm just barely getting through the days. It's like some days it is a victory just to get by without drinking and using, and just doing that alone. And I had a real struggle with that, where I was like, those days don't feel like a victory, because it didn't really feel like I accomplished anything. Like I just didn't succumb to an impulse, and I just didn't like take a big step backwards. Like that's all I really did. And I was just kind of like start to get down on myself of like not counting those days as victories. At a certain point, I want to accomplish more. I want my days to be more meaningful than that. And that's kind of the tricky process where you start to move from what are the timetables, like how many days can you spend in where just not drinking or using is good enough. But then when you need to focus on bigger victories, like bigger life goals and different sort of things, like when do you know when to do that? And can't you, isn't it possible to do both at the same time? That's really what I'm trying to aim for in this early sobriety. And man, it's a struggle. And some days, like right now, it's kind of weird, even though I'm speaking like this, I'm still hopeful. Like that's one big thing about hope, is that even though you can feel a little bit discouraged, even though you can feel depressed, even though you can feel bitter or resentful towards life, you can still have hope even with those feelings. Like you can have both those feelings at the same time. And then you can also have things be going good in your life, but when you don't have hope, it almost doesn't matter. It's just a matter of time before you'll either fall back to like old behaviors, or you'll just want to escape your life. And that sort of escapism is the one biggest way you know how to escape, is to drink or use. And so I still feel hopeful, but I think there's a part of me that's just really scared of that hope just disappearing. I've been hopeful before, and then I've been hopeless before. And I don't know. I think this is part of that future tripping thing where I'm just worried about like something occurring in the future, something occurring tomorrow or later, that me just sitting here and worrying about it isn't doing anything. Like that's one of the biggest differences between like the difference between being actually concerned and worry. Worry is just simply thinking about and ruminating and getting stressed out over a problem, but not doing anything about it. It's kind of like you just fret about your finances all the time and not ever having enough money, but then you don't do anything to try to remedy that. Sometimes there are some things that are just impossible in the moment or where you're at in life to truly fix, but sometimes there are things you can do. But just simply worrying about it and not doing anything is just so counterintuitive, and it'll eventually put you in a spot where you could just do something drastic, or you could just get in a more apathetic mood towards life. And I'm just trying to just do this day by day thing. And sometimes it comes down to where you have to do it hour by hour, or you have to break down your days into sections and just get through that part of the section. Like just get through a hard time period at work during that day, or get through like a stress, or you're fighting with your significant other, or you're struggling with like your children, or just getting through even not the full day, but just even moments. And getting through those and dealing with a lot of those like struggling moments over and over again can feel like never ending in that sense. Everything is temporary and everything does pass, but at the same time, it's just it can feel that it's just too repetitive, or it's just too insurmountable, or it's just too relentless. And these are all the things that I'm myself just am struggling with. And I know I'm just trying to keep on the right path, where I'm just trying to do the things that I know help and get rid of the things that don't. Just trying to eat healthy, do some exercise, go to meetings, talk with people, try to keep contact with other people that have the same goals and aspirations that I do. And I'm just trying, and I guess I'm just, worried about it failing at times. And it causes this sort of anxiety, or sometimes not even anxiety, but it causes this kind of discouragement or depression that is just a bad place to be. But I'm still trying, and I'm still hopeful. So I believe that's a good place to be. But I'm just trying to do this thing just day by day, and hopefully it gets a little bit easier, and then some days will be maybe harder, but I can just get through those days. So if anybody else is going through that, my heart goes out to you, and I totally relate with the struggle, and I hope that you can get through those days as well too. Other than that, be well.